So once again, good morning everyone, and thank you very much, John, for this great introduction. I shall not add anything to it because you've already heard way too much about me rather than the subject. But yes, it is quite true that I live in Ireland now, as you can recognize from my call sign, and I also have some history from the UK, because before I went to Ireland 22 years ago, I used to live in London. I have lived here for 13 years, enjoyed my time as a student, and I do miss actually UK a little bit. It's nice to come back there, so it's a little bit of nostalgia revisiting the old places. Things are slightly different here, and in most interesting ways. The train system is fantastic. I came yesterday from Bath. It's like it's a bit like the queue outside this morning. It's some well-managed chaos. The only thing you can be sure about the English train system is that trains are designed to leave on time. Now, they don't necessarily need to arrive on time, but that doesn't matter. Because if you thrust yourself into the system and you just have a little bit of trust, you somehow manage to arrive at the destination. Yesterday, when I came from Bath, trains were running 2 hours late. I arrived half an hour early. It's amazing. It's a British innovation that I think in Ireland we still have to figure out how to do it. We have just one train that goes all around the country and you never know when it comes. But anyway, the point of my presentation is about some innovations that happened not necessarily here or in Ireland, but which happened in all of our countries, but that I mean countries that share a similar licensing scheme for examinations. In this presentation, I want to give you a little bit of background as to what we have done and what has happened in other countries without too much detail, because it would be a little bit boring, but just enough to give you an idea of an opportunity. To get to that opportunity, I need to say a few words about the challenges. Those challenges, I am sure you understand and identify with, so I won't spend too much time on it. But the one thing I really don't have for you, and I'm very sorry about it, is the answer how to solve it. So in case you think that I'm going to deliver some grand solution at the end, no. I have some ideas that I believe would be best used to start a conversation, to have a discussion between members of illustrious radio societies such as your society, such as RSGB and many others, and hopefully in a constructive way to come up with a solution. I think we can do it. So let me give you just a little bit of background. The background starts with Hark. Hark, or Harmonized Amateur Radio Examination Certificate, it's a little bit like designing a bathroom. Think about bathrooms. Bathrooms are important, and another great British invention, a sink. It's well engineered. You go to, I miss it, we don't have that in Ireland, but you go to a sink, there is a tap, you open it, hot boiling water comes out. It hurts. But a British engineer thought about that. There is another tap next to it with freezing water, so you can put your hand underneath and problem solved, and it works. We don't have that in Ireland. It doesn't work like that. You have one tap, so boring, no drama, no drama. But somehow, at the end of the day, you emerge cleansed. You emerged ready for the day. You are able to engage with the society and your profession. The bathroom works, despite those engineering differences. Now, you could say that's because I didn't pass the exam in the UK. I don't know how to use the British bathroom, and probably have a point, that's true. But after a little bit of trial and error, I do emerge cleansed from a British bathroom, despite this thing that you've got. Now, British showers, that's another story. I'm not going to bore you with that, but a long sinusoid that reminds you of QSB. Okay, you get the point. So Hark is like bathroom design. Essentially, there are 40 countries which are part of the CEPT group of countries, including UK and Ireland, and 7 others, Japan, New Zealand, for example, who participate in this agreement that allows a holder of that certificate to get a full residential license in any of those countries. Now, this is a little bit confusing. People very often think about Hark in terms of their ability to operate in another country. That is a different thing. It's very similar in the way it is identified, because that thing that lets you operate in another country by prefixing usually your call sign with whatever you are supposed to do in the other country is CPT TR 61-01, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about 61-02, closely related standard that says that if you pass the UK full license exam here, you get a piece of, well, no longer a paper, it's a PDF now, which is called the Hark, the Harmonized Amateur Radio Examination Certificate. And on foot of that, you can go to any of those 47 countries and say, please give me your full license, provided that you are going to be resident over there. So you need to have an address or something like that. So this is a pretty big thing. It means that somebody who gets a Hark in Ireland can come here and say, hello, Ofcom, on foot of this PDF, I want a full British license, and they will get it. So they both emerge with a full license, yet the process and how they get to it is not always exactly the same. So in Ireland, we went through a very interesting process only a few years ago. So I went through the old license 3 years ago. I know you went through your licenses before radio was invented. I realized that, but that's just trust me on that one. Those 3 years were very busy, and John already gave some justice to it. Well, as soon as I have passed my license, the Irish regulator, Comreg, it's like our Ofcom, said, well, we're going to change it, probably because of me. And as a result, they said, well, we want to ask all participants to tender for a contract, and we want some changes, and maybe you want to modernize it a little bit. Well, the Irish Radio Transmitters Society participated, no surprise, because they've been doing this for a while, and won that contract, and I was indeed part of the team that wrote the winning submission, and I learned an awful lot about it. What I learned at that time is that you have an opportunity to make a change from time to time, but not all the time. As amateur radio is evolving, the change when it comes to the licensing regime and education is not following at the same pace. So having literally been just licensed, I kind of sat on it and said, everyone, we have an opportunity. This is the moment when we can move things a little bit forward. And that's exactly what we've done. We've taken that opportunity when change was inevitable to change probably a little bit more than the regulator initially thought we were going to do, but it seems to have worked out. To make that successful, we also had to develop a new teaching curriculum. And this is a project which would have been impossible without the help of great many radio amateurs and societies around the world. And if I could ask Peter over here, Peter was by far the person who told me that I knew nothing about how radio works and made sure that this is really veritable. And when you read it, this you can more or less rely on. This 400-page book is what Irish amateurs study in order to get their license. Now, in UK, you have a 3-step system. We don't have that in Ireland. In Ireland, if you want to have a license, you have to go to the full license straight ahead, which means studying for Hark. Without the help of Peter, without the help of Ian, who taught me everything I really now know about antennas and transmission lines, and many other things, and John, who's hiding somewhere over there. Hello, John. Without them, this book wouldn't happen. And thank you very much for your input and for feedback on that. And you can get the free PDF, so you don't even need to buy it from us. I think we are trying not to make money on this because unlike with RSGB, IRTS is always poor by design. So anyway, that's another story. Okay, so that's a little bit of background where we come from. Let me tell you about licensing and examinations. There are many differences in both. In the UK, you get a license as a person. Technically, in Ireland, you don't. In Ireland, the license is to a station, but in practice, to get it, there must always be a person, with very few exceptions, which not even contest stations, even they need to have a person. So in practice, it is personal. But that's not the case elsewhere. In Germany, Switzerland, and in Luxembourg, you actually get 2 licenses. You license the operator separately from the station, which requires 2 sets of tests and different education and slightly different thinking about what happens, which kind of makes sense because the call sign is really something that we treat. We are very possessive about our call signs. They are very, very much us. The station, you know, who cares? You'll get a better station anyway. Sweden, they don't do actually licensing in the sense of that word at all. There is no radio license in Sweden. You get an operator's certificate. And that means that not only the legislation, but the attitude to it is different. And yet, they are all part of Hark. I hope you are getting the gist here. That, you know, it's like that design of bathrooms, very different bathrooms, yet it all somehow works. The exams are massively different. Now, the British system, 3 tiers, you all know, so I'm not going to tell you about it, but in France, there are 40 questions with a 75% pass mark. In Netherlands, you go to a driving license testing center. Sorry, RSGB, there's an opportunity for you in the future. Okay, 50 questions, 76 pass mark, and, well, so what would you like today? A driving license or a radio license? Just, you know, pick a ticket. In Norway, they had to improve. People were really complaining because it was 35 questions and it was really easy in 2022. So they made it a little harder. It's now 50 questions and an 80% pass mark, but it's not that hard. In Poland, there are only 20 questions. Poles, I'm Polish, we like to be always a little different, but don't complain about it because we'll take the plumbers away. So the 20 questions, and there are 3 choices. Not 4, there are 3 choices, which makes it easier. That's a problem. Don't worry, it's divided into 5 parts, and you cannot make more than 2 errors per part, which actually makes it a very interesting exam. Except all the questions are also public, so everybody memorizes them. They didn't give you the answers, though. They only say what the questions are. Obviously, somebody published the answers, too. Now, the differences between Ireland and UK are very interesting. There are some differences. The balance and the weighting of topics is different. I would argue that what makes one easier makes the other harder. In UK, you tend to be a little bit stricter, for instance, on electronics, but you give people all the formulas, the sheets, basically, you know, the Wikipedia, maybe without ChatGPT, but I heard that's coming in the future. Probably not. But there are also similarities. We both end up with a Hark, and both exams comply with TR 61-02. So what's my point? My point is that there is not just wiggle room here, but there is a massive opportunity to learn from those differences and take that next step, like we took in Ireland when the opportunity arose because of Comreg's invitation to tender. So, what's the challenge that we should address? I have a quiz for you. There are 3 questions. The answer to each question is a year, just a date. When did radios, and by that I mean commercially produced amateur radios, amateur use radios, start using DSP, digital signal processing, for signal demodulation? In other words, the time when, you know, heterodyne and all of that stuff kind of started passing into oblivion. Second question, how long has DSP been used to modulate CW? You know, what we teach as part of Hark is that, you know, there is a key, then there is some, you know, maybe a condenser, maybe there's some resistor, you know, there's always a resistor, right? And then there is a buffer, right? So you don't drive this, and then there's, you know, that. No. When did CW start being generated entirely using digital signal processing? Forget about what we teach. And the best question, when was the last all-analog radio made that you could commercially buy? Now, I'm not talking here about the ones you build, and I have full respect for that, but the ones you buy. All right, let's check if you know. DSP does signal demodulation since 1995. Those were the first 3 radios that literally break through. DSP modulates CW since 1995 with Kenwood, TS870 being the first one. But the last point is the one that almost hurts to see. The last all-analog radio that was made in 1999. That was the ICOM 781. Now, arguably, some people will argue with me that IC 718, which is still in production, is all analog, but the filters are digital. So, how important are filters? Of course, that's a good question. What's my point? I'm starting to stir the pot, right? You get the feeling. Where is he going to go with it? Is he going to kill my favorite subject or not? No, I don't know the answers. I just want you to think about what we are teaching, what we are examining, and the so-called reality. Amateur radio newly licensed people in UK go through a tiered system. So what I'm going to say right now perhaps doesn't apply to you. In other words, that's why you have somebody from Ireland stirring the pot, because you can blame the Irish. And since I'm not the Irish and I see there is an Irish contingent over there checking what I say, blame the Polish. Just remember, the plumbers. So, the newly licensed in Ireland really don't build anymore. I mean, there may be an odd one out, but they just buy. And then you say, oh yeah, but they repair. No, they can't repair that thing because most of it is opaque code. I'm a software engineer, so I should know. Opaque code that nobody understands, that runs on some chip, and there are, just some resistors to make you feel good. And what do those resistors do? Usually let you use the radio on bands you are not supposed to use it. So at least there is some good use for those resistors. But, other than that, everything else happens in that blooming little computer. And I don't like computers. That's normal. When you work in something you usually don't like after a while. What about those who want to repair it? Have you tried repairing those? Yeah, you can do the resistor thing, but anything more than that is becoming harder. The level of integration. And besides, if you are going to do that, you have to learn much more. We need RF engineers, and they need to learn stuff that we don't teach anymore, and that we definitely don't examine them on. On the other hand, the world is changing. There is so much more stress on regulation, on safety. People can buy powerful equipment. 1.5 kilowatt amplifier on Alibaba, that's what was that, 50 euros nowadays? Who cares about licensing? It's actually advertised for 3 kilowatts. It's amazing, it doesn't kill everybody each time you turn it on, but that's, perhaps the licensing works and there is a little bit of care in the process. EMF, safety and understanding of it, you went through a massive revolution over here, and you understand that this subject is not only not going to go away, but it has to become a friend of ours. So thinking about that, okay, this is the I'm really stirring the pot slide, okay? You probably will not like me here, so it's a little bit, all right. Yes, everybody needs to learn some universal basics, impedance matching, Ohm's law. We're not going to argue about that. UK is quite intense on teaching electronic theory, but remember, you get the cheat sheets in the exam, so is it a test of intelligence or is it a test of, okay, I'm stirring the pot, so I'll shut up. Let's talk about the French, because we can do that. Apologies for anybody watching it online from France, but in France, they really appreciate the color coding of resistors, which you have to know to get your license. What about people who are colorblind? Oh, okay. Maybe they get a special paper. Why do we still teach block diagrams of antique designs? Because Hark tells you have to. If you open Hark, Annex 6, which is page 21, I think, of this 24-page document, you have to teach block diagrams of that CW thing that has not been in general production since 1999. Now, you could say, because it's good to know it. Yes, but so are differential equations. Can you explain to me why nobody can explain how an antenna works? If I ask all of you here how an antenna works, or even as simpler, how does current travel through a conductor, I will have 200 different answers and we'll have a great time. But something's funny. You smell the pot is now really starting to boil, right? It's not stinking yet, but it's kind of, you're not sure which way it smells. So now I'm going to make it a little bit unpleasant. Are you familiar with GMDSS long-range certificate marine radio examinations? Oh, well, good. It's a kind of an important certificate to get if you do this thing on the seas, on waters. In Ireland, it applies even to rivers, which I never understood why maritime mobile in Ireland is on a river, but anyway, that's a different story. Since 1999, they have de-emphasized some aspects of electronics and refocused on operating procedures. Funnily enough, that's the year when the last fully analog radios were made. I'm just saying, you know, blame the Irish or the Pole. So what have we tried to do in Ireland? No, we couldn't solve this problem because Hark is a set of golden handcuffs. It is a set of golden handcuffs because on one side it gives you a lot of wiggle room because it's thankfully so high level and so non-descriptive that it's actually not that difficult to comply with it. But at the same time, it does limit you as to what you have to teach, like ancient block diagrams of things that maybe somebody will make from time to time, but not sure how important they are to passing the exam. So without going into detail, this is our redesigned exam. And 60 questions in 2 parts. You have to pass each part with a 60% pass mark. Can you spot what's interesting? What we've done here is what the regulator wanted. The regulator wanted us to talk about safety, interference, immunity, both on the technical side as well as on the operational side. Operating procedures and non-interference is the biggest part of that section, while safety is the biggest part of the technical section. But we still do teach people very much Ohm's law, impedance, and those block diagrams. Don't worry. Section A5 still asks them for ancient designs, so we haven't really solved the problem in a way, because we can't. We have some restrictions on us. But we have rebalanced it. We have changed it. We used the opportunity. What we have found out is that it has worked. What we have found out is that the technical part is still the part where people fail the exam. No surprise. Some people will always struggle with Ohm's law, and perhaps that's the way it is supposed to be. But what we have really found interesting whilst teaching it, the level of interest in propagation, modern design, SDR. Oh, are you telling me that analog and digital are both theoretically and practically absolutely equivalent? And why? And what does Fourier have to do with it? Well, there's an awful lot of interesting conversation that started as a result of those changes. EMF safety. We thought it would be a boring subject killer. No! People who are getting into it like to be able to knowledgeably talk about what they do with their neighbors. In fact, our regulator asked us to make sure that as part of our education, we prepare amateurs to have grown-up educated discussions with those who surround them, which perhaps is something that's more needed now in the 21st century than ever before. But what really surprised us is how much interest there was on the operational side. All people want to be good operators. They want to learn how to be socially responsible as an amateur. And funnily enough, how not to interfere. Non-interference is easy if you know how to do it. It's harder if you have to learn by making mistakes. Essentially, what we have found is that technology and theory still remains the primary interest of amateur radio. No surprise, and obviously it needs to be. We need those RF engineers after all. However, what we have definitely found that it has to be modern and relevant. Okay, I switched off the fire under that pot. I think you got my point on that. But the one thing that we really were surprised in the most positive way about is just how much the newcomers crave good operating practices. And it's not easy to learn them because operational guidance is, to put it mildly, somewhat dated. Now, you've heard that you will be able to blame me for the update to this document when it is agreed upon by 136 countries. I don't know what it will look like, but at this point, as a team, we are trying to modernize it and remove where it is dated whilst maintaining what was so good about it. But the real issue is that we don't have references. You know, telling people to read a radio operator's manual from the 19th century from His Majesty the King to tell you how to operate a de-expedition doesn't really work very well. You know, have you tried those manuals? They're great. They are very well written. And I'd like to have those post office manuals in a modern form today, but we just don't have them. We have focused so much on other aspects of radio that we have almost forgotten to tell people in a way where most of us can agree how to be a good operator. So what do? They learn online. They go on YouTube and they learn how to do the pile-up. Now, actually, the morning's pile-up here was pretty good, but what you see online is questionable, to put it politely. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And I just realized it says YouTube over here. Of course, does not apply to RSGB-sponsored material on YouTube. Thank you. But the hard reality is, and I don't want to make you feel sad, but the hard reality is that there is a little bit too much disappointing behavior on air. And we see people who are trying to be helpful, and helpfulness usually turns the wrong way. Almost any time somebody says, you know, up, you, whatever, and here comes, you know, a sequence of words that cannot be live streamed, you can expect that it's not going to work. It's just going to heat up that situation, and people are going to be at their necks, and nobody's having a good time. Arguments on the ground. Neighborly relations about antennas in living spaces that are getting more and more compressed. How are we going to solve it for the future generation? Would you say that our regulators are getting just a little bit anxious about the problem because they are getting too many complaints about somebody doing something to someone on air? Oh, they don't want to deal with it. They have other problems to deal with, like you know, Elon Musk trying to take away the satellites or whatever else. You know, so we need to give them a little bit of space when it comes to dealing with our problems. Learning from mistakes is how we used to do it. And learning from mistakes is good, but it is discouraging, and it definitely leads to conflict and DQRM. There is not a moment of doubt in my head that one of the worst things you can do when you experience DQRM is to tell somebody on air at that very moment how to do it properly. Without identifying yourself, preferably. Yes, and maybe spice it up a little bit. Now, those poor habits are hard to eliminate, and the newcomers to hobby look at that and say, oh, so that's how you make contacts. And that stays for another 10 years. My mother was a teacher. Her mother was a teacher. We come from a family of teachers. I believe in good education. It works. It does work. But it's slow. It's not going to help any of you in this room, with the exception of a few people who don't have gray hair. Education is a long-term proposition. You are laying down something now to change 10 years from now. So maybe those of you at the beginning of your retirement, you will benefit from it as you are a little bit, you know, closer towards when your annuity is paying more than you thought it would. Maybe that's the moment in time when education will pay back. But for most of you and me, education will be uphill work that will not give us the results now, but that will make amateur radio better in the future. And I strongly believe that to do that, you have to be a good teacher. Teaching is a skill, but it becomes much easier with a good curriculum, which requires fair amount of team effort, which has to be somehow motivated, and when you have a clear goal. The first point is easy to solve. Most of you here in this room this morning are interested in future of amateur radio and education. That's why you decided to stay in this room. Thank you very much. I don't feel too embarrassed now. But the point is that you all can contribute to changing it in a constructive and positive way. That's the easy part. The difficult parts are parts 2 and 3. How to motivate people to want to learn all of that, and what is it that we are actually trying to do? Well, it's very easy, actually. There has to be a carrot. A carrot is Hark. Hark is a carrot. Hark is such an illustrious goal to get. You know, it's like a universal license for 47 countries around the world. It used to be 48, but they started attacking us. So 47 countries in the world. It's very motivating. What's my point? If we could make Hark focus more on what we actually need, we would force those youngsters to learn what will make amateur radio better in 10 years. Oh, well, that's a rather obvious point. You're now feeling, why did you pay all this money to hear something so obvious from this man over here who obviously doesn't have anything new to say? Well, what I have hopefully to say is that we first have to have clarity as to what it is that we want people to learn. And we do not have a goal. To paraphrase a famous politician, we don't have a plan. We have a concept of a plan. Oh, okay. A concept of a plan is not going to get us anywhere. Good ideas are a wonderful thing, but we need something more than just good ideas. And that is the shared opportunity that I want to make you optimistic about. With regulatory support, and I know for a fact that regulators want to support us in that, Hark could be modernized. However, to do that, we need to find those thoughtful, balanced ideas to go beyond the, oh, it used to be good 20 years ago. Well, now, you know, what was 20 years ago will never come back, even though some famous politicians think it will, but it won't. You know, you cannot make things the way they were because everything is moving forward. You know, 1999, those radios are gone. You can't buy them. Maybe on eBay, I don't know. Let me leave you with a thought. Thanks to a good friend of mine, Jerry, EI6 Bravo Tango. It's not about making exams harder or easier. No. Leave them at whatever level of hardness you want. Let's help future operators actually know more about amateur radio with the exactly same amount of work that we require them to put in now. We don't want them to work any harder or less. We just want to make them be better at it. And I think that is possible. And I cannot wait to have a conversation with those of you who would like to perhaps join hands and let's start this project. Let's modernize Hark, and your retirement will be even better 10 years down the line. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Rafal. Some very definitely food for thought there, very much so. Thank you for that. We have a short time for questions, just a very short time, and then, but Rafal will be here. How long have we got, Steve?
Just a few. We're trying to get back on time.
Yeah, so just a few questions, and then Rafal will be here all day, and you'll be able to talk to him.
Hopefully a fairly quick one. I've seen it said by a number of people engaged in the process that there is zero chance of getting Hark updated. You seem to be saying the opposite. So could you say a little bit more about that? What sort of timescale might it happen in if the member societies get their acts together?
So I'm a perpetual optimist, which is why I guess I gave you a different perspective to what you have heard. I think it would take something between 3 and 5 years to modernize it. But I do know for a fact, and I cannot unfortunately be more forthcoming with the detail, that there is support for that to happen, provided the member societies pull together. Now, maybe it will take a few more than just IRTS and RSGB.
Just a quick one, I think. You didn't mention very much about practical work. And certainly when I was studying for my foundation, I had to go along and be humiliated in front of the elders and betters who said, no, you don't want to do it like that, you want to do it like this. And we touched on things like operating practice and causing interference and all that kind of thing. Is there a reason why you didn't touch on practical examination work? Because there's no hope of bringing it back, or what?
I'm not sure. I think that this could be done. Certainly, when you get a driving license in Netherlands, you also have to drive a car. So there is precedent for that. But I think that ship has temporarily sailed. It might come back to port. I think that discussion still needs to be had, to what extent and what value. But it's just not a point on which I have a clear opinion yet.
Okay. Thank you, Rafal. So
This one question.
just one more, and then we really will have to move on. But Rafal will be taking questions. You'll be in the EMF.
I will be in the EMF room
and you'll be in the bar and all.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So you will be available.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Brian Nuttall, M0OYG. So you were obviously we're looking at the younger people, the people coming forward, and you were saying education is a great thing, and I completely agree. However, it just depends, for example, in schools, which science teacher you have. If that science teacher is biology or another field, they want to give the kids the questions for that. When my son was at school, he was a biology teacher. There was papers there on radio, television, all sorts of areas that he was interested in that would help him, and where amateur radio would come in, because obviously he got it through himself, then it didn't match up. So although it's a great STEM subject, it very much depends. And if they're not taught that sort of area, they're never going to be interested in amateur radio. And we need to get them in as early as you can and keep them. Because when I did stuff for the Air Training Corps, yeah, I kept the kids there, but once they left the Air Training Corps, they forgot about amateur radio.
A great point, and actually there is a presentation immediately after the break that will be touching on the subject of education and engagement with the youngsters. I think we have a more complex world here, because we are really addressing three different groups of people at that stage, but also, you know, the midlife person as well as the retired person, and we have to devise one exam that thoroughly works for all of them. That makes it definitely more complex, but without a moment of doubt, there are paths to get youngsters on board that I don't think we are exploring yet.
Okay, thank you very much, Rafal. I think we'll have to call today at that. Really appreciate the thoughts that you've given us, the thought-provoking thoughts that you've given us, and we will definitely be keeping in touch. And as I say, Rafal will be available, and you've already said there's a very good youth, IOTA and schools presentation after this, after coffee time. Thank you very much, Rafal.
Thank you very much.